Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Drop Recaps. Today we will be discussing the Yeezy 350 Carbon Drop. Specifically, in this series, we will cover some of the most hyped drops of the year, no matter how hectic or mundane they may be. Throughout the video, we will first cover how each site with decent stock dropped the product from most popular to the audience to least in non-chronological order. We will only be mentioning sites with decent stock in consideration of your time. What manual exploits or tips worked compared to what didn't, what bots worked most efficiently and setup tips for those, resale value of the product post-drop in comparison to what was expected, in addition to whether holding or selling as soon as possible will be most profitable. Feel free to subscribe and enable post notifications just to stay 100% updated on all hyped releases, including how to cop these for upcoming drops as well. We will also use these videos as learning experience, so whether you did take a W or L, you will always come away with at least something. Even if the glass isn't half full, we'll always have the glass itself knowledge. Please also drop in the comments below how you performed on this drop, whether it was a W or L, and what site specifically you did end up copying on, as well as any specific tips that you think did help. This way, the community will be of use as well. Without any hesitation though, starting with everyone's favorite, Footsites. What's new? Starting with how manual went right from the start. No matter how fast users were, it was near impossible to cart. Once again, numerous errors trying to add to cart initially, but those who did persist did eventually see some success. Remember, persistency is absolutely key when it does come to Footsites. Any of the few manual checkouts did occur towards the later end of the drop rather than towards the beginning. The takeaway is that persistency is absolutely key once again. Regarding how bots performed on this drop, it was extremely similar to the past few drops we've been seeing. There hasn't really been any major changes to the protection on Footsites, hence we have been seeing the same bots perform well. The essential takeaway is to make sure you purchase plenty of residential data for very hype drops like this with very high stock, since the drops do tend to last a while. And speaking of proxies, for the most reliable, fast residential proxies, feel free to check out the link in the description for KIP proxies. You essentially have 5 of the most reliable providers all across sneaker Twitter, all on the same dashboard, so feel free to check it out. And then just some other tips: ensure that you continue running. Also, don't be afraid to stop and restart tasks every once in a while, especially when you do see checkouts start popping up at certain times. Now, regarding which bots perform the best, again, it's been pretty consistent this way over the past few drops, which ones have been performing the best. So to start off, Kodai did have a standout performance simply due to the mass amount of checkouts. This has been the case consistently for the past several months. Arguably still the best Footsites bot due to how it has consistently remained at the top for so long. They also have a PayPal mode to help prevent payment verification cancels, which has been working quite well for reducing the risk rate. Total checkouts were 38,000. Footsites, of course, were obviously a vast majority of that. Cyber was also right up there, considering that their total checkouts were 36k. Now, the bot that I've really been wanting to talk about for a while now is Prism, although I would argue that Kodai is certainly the most consistent overall Footsites bot. For this drop specifically, as well as drops we've seen throughout September, one of which being the biohacks, Prism definitely took the #1 position. What's important to note is that they've been hitting very high numbers on these drops, but what's really notable here is the fact they have so few users in comparison to these other massive bots. So proportionally, if not right up there with them, perhaps even a little bit better. So I've certainly been more than impressed with Prism recently, so that's just something I did want to mention. The Kickstation and NSB are also still notable, although their performance has still consistently been above average, not quite as high as Kodai or Prism or Cyber. But what's notable is for the features they do have for tasks. The Kickstation specifically allows you to use a separate proxy list for checkouts, which does not completely prevent payment verification cancels, but checking out with a local IP does help reduce your risk rate. Payment verification cancels are not due to them wanting to cancel resellers buying multiple pairs, which is what you might see skate shops doing frequently, but rather it's completely different than that. They're simply canceling you due to a high risk rate. It's not because they're trying to attack resellers specifically. It's not like they're targeting them. It's just because you have a very high risk rate when you tend to check out tons of pairs like that, especially when you're using the same payment method on different IPs when you're checking out. So this feature that is in the Kickstation, which allows you to use a separate proxy list or even local host, which is specific for this situation, that certainly does help. And a very similar thing is with NSB. NSB does have a browser mode. Now, when you do still have that browser open, it is still using your proxy. So in order to take advantage of this efficiently when trying to avoid payment verification or reducing risk, all you would have to do is log into an account on that browser and then log in on your localhost browser rather than the in-bot browser. So through this, obviously you can't completely avoid payment verification. You might, but the main thing is that it's helping you reduce risk. And that's why I think it's incredible that bots like Kodai, the Kickstation, and NSB do have these particular features. And anyway, the last bot I did want to mention, not due to a standout performance, even though it's been extremely successful and consistent for around 15 drops in a row, is EasyCopBot. It's simply a Footsite only bot, and what has amazed me so far is the fact that it's been a free beta bot for a very significant amount of time. Like I said, for 15 drops in a row or so, it has been consistently performing well. Perhaps not as good as Kodai or Cyber or Prism, but regardless, it has had a consistent, successful performance over these last few drops. And again, what amazes me is that it's been a free bot this entire time. So I did feel that that was somewhat notable. But anyway, Whatbot, Project Destroyer, Wrath, Toru, Phantom, Ganesh, they all performed very well, just like the last few drops. Nothing really new here, great performances all around. And of course, there's other bots that support Footsites now as well that have been performing well, but again, we don't want to mention every single bot, more or less just the top performers. And again, just a reminder for anyone who does need reliable, fast residential proxies, be sure to check out Kip Proxies. Again, the link is in the description. You have the top 5 residential proxy providers all on the same dashboard for extremely cheap prices, link in the description. Moving on to Finish Line and JD Sports. Similar to Footsites, Manual didn't see much more success here than usual. However, that's not to say it was impossible, because there certainly was some more success. The primary takeaway is that bans have been getting heavier and heavier as drops progress, so I would no longer suggest using the multiple people jig at all when it comes to Finish Line and JD Sports specifically, but rather just opening up one Chrome user or just using the app on your phone. And hypothetically, if you do get an IP ban, just connect to your hotspot on your phone. What you can do, this would be if you do happen to have a proxy switcher, then if you're using proxies, you can open up multiple Chrome users manually, but that's about it. I wouldn't suggest more than one when you're on your local IP address, and that's it, because you more than likely will eventually get banned. It's been getting more and more sensitive as time has been progressing. Now, regarding bots, the top performance have changed slightly compared to what we're used to. This is specifically due to the CAPTCHA that Finish Line has added back in September. Kodai and Prism both certainly stood out the most on this drop in terms of success. They have had no issues whatsoever handling the newly added CAPTCHA as well, a consistent performance like we have been seeing. Rush also performed well, perhaps not as well as Kodai and Prism, but certainly a notable performance. And I feel Cyber is worth mentioning as well, since they have recently been flopping on Finish Line a lot. However, this drop specifically, they did end up performing very well. So it's great to see that they have bounced back when it comes to Finish Line, back to how it used to be. And the last one I did want to mention today is Wrath. The reason being is that they just recently launched their Finish Line module last week, so it's awesome to see that they're off to a great start, of course. Now, with that out of the way, let's move on to Shopify. Recently, ever since Shopify started using the checkpoint, we've evidently been seeing significantly more manual success than before, the majority of which has been with individuals who are using autofillers. An example of one would be passive autofill, which is offered for free to all Endurance members. So if you would be interested in that, be sure to follow the Endurance Twitter for any updates on potential restocks in the future. Although it might not be for a little while, I will keep you guys updated on there for any future restock. And aside from that, this goes for botting too, but it really comes down to the type of CAPTCHA you end up getting on the checkpoint. If your V3 score is too low, you'll get those awful fading CAPTCHAs that take forever, so I highly suggest trying to keep your Gmails as active as possible to keep those V3 scores high. Overall, for Shopify, it's been pretty consistent over the last few drops for the top performers. That would include Cyber, NSB, Kodai, Balco, and Project Destroyer. And the standout for Shopify, above all, I would have to say goes to Cyber on this drop due to them single-handedly securing around 65% or so Shopify stock in total. Like I was mentioning before, your V3 score is the key player for hitting Shopify as long as you do have a good Shopify bot. I would highly suggest investing in capture tools and Prime Gmails to really help you guys with these checkpoints. Although it is unfortunately impossible to get a one-click on checkpoints, you could certainly avoid those fading captures that take 45 seconds to solve, and trust me, it does make a huge difference. Moving on to Hibbett manually, I actually did see a decent amount of success on this drop, which was great to see, at least compared to some of the prior drops. When all bots work well, the site pretty much dies completely, but this time, the site didn't die completely, although it was a little bit slow on the initial drop. That was simply due to high traffic, which is inevitable, and a decent amount of manual users were able to check out, so that was nice to see. If you are going manual, my biggest tip is to ensure that you are using your mobile devices and you do enable Apple Pay. It will certainly expedite the checkout process. As for bots, the standout on this drop would have to be Rush. In general, they have been performing consistently well on Hibbets. In fact, many bots that normally perform well on Hibbets today did not see the same results at all. Regarding Foot Locker Europe regions, drop after drop, it has been near impossible for manual users. I feel like I say this every single drop recap video, and it's really pathetic. It's like they don't even care at all at this point. So hopefully it's not too long until all the Europe regions do switch to the new Europe Footsites, because although it's still difficult to cop manually then, of course, too, but with this current Foot Locker Europe, the way it's been over the last few months, just impossible to hit manually. So, yeah, they definitely need to do something about that. It's been way too long for no changes being made at all. But anyway, regarding the best bots, like usual, Ganesh certainly did have the standout performance. Last but certainly not least, Yeezy Supply. As expected, manual users did see decent success here, mainly just because of the very high stock. The majority of success from manual users today I did see were from people who were logged into their Gmail accounts, which I have been explaining in multiple how to cop guides. So again, make sure to subscribe and enable post notifications if you do happen to be new here. Regarding bots, both Splash Force and Kodai had really dominant performances here. However, Dashi, Project Destroyer, and Wrath all performed very well as well. I was really excited to talk about Polaris today because of their magic mode performing really well over the past few drops. Unfortunately, though, it ironically got clipped on this drop specifically. I'm sure they will bounce back, though, since they have been absolutely killing it before this. But anyway, that will conclude it for the site recaps, tips, best bots, etc. So now let's move on to the resale section for this. First of all, was this turnout expected? Yes, absolutely. Just like we mentioned in the shoes to resale video, it turned out exactly as expected. Regardless of the huge stock, demand was certainly high enough for easy lunch money, especially on sizes under 8. It's kind of funny to see a lot of new people get spooked by that high stock number, but just keep in mind, guys, demand is definitely the biggest factor when it does come to these, especially Yeezys. They've really always had high stock on every single drop, but what's important is with a colorway like this, the demand was certainly very, very high. Now, whether you should hold or sell them, this would really depend on your capital, so it's very relative, and I'll break this down. First of all, you should expect a marginal price drop over the next few weeks as more pairs go into circulation. However, I do expect a decent rise in price over the next 4 to 6 months, which isn't too long. The only thing that I'm not expecting is a massive rise, especially in large sizes. Best to hold would ideally be sizes under 8, so if you do need capital for these drops, sell as soon as possible before the price of drop for when pairs go into circulation. However, if you don't need any capital at all, definitely sit on these for a few months because it's not going to hurt you. Although there will be that slight marginal drop initially, they will eventually be worth the hold long term. Very similar to what we saw recently with the Cinder drop. But anyway, that will conclude it. Remember, if you guys do need affordable, reliable, pre-verified sneakers or Adidas accounts or residential proxies, the link for them is in the description below. Also, feel free to follow Endurance's Twitter and keep that on 10 on Twitter for urgent updates. Like if you did enjoy or you perhaps learned a thing or two, and of course, subscribe and enable post notifications if you do happen to be new here. With that, though, enjoy your day and good luck on all these future releases.
Get that big foot away from me. Get your foot off my foot. Why are you hurting me with your foot? Can't you find somewhere else to keep it put? Get your foot